Hello there. I'm Rob Hudson. I'm a member with the law firm Frost Brown Todd, and thank you for joining us for our NKBA Legend Series. As background, through the Legend Series, the NKBA strives to serve our legal profession by providing information to inspire and guide attorneys as they develop ethical, responsible, and effective practice skills. Now, in this series, each month we present an interview of an attorney who's really made a mark on the community and the profession here in Northern Kentucky and Greater Cincinnati. During the program today, if you have any questions, please present them using the public chat feature. And at the end of the program, we'll follow up on as many of those questions as time permits. Today's program is going to be excellent because it spotlights NKBA legend Frank Warnock. And by way of introduction, Frank is one of Northern Kentucky's most accomplished, experienced, and well-respected public sector attorneys. He's practiced in Northern Kentucky for more than 30 years. He served as Bellevue's city attorney for more than a decade. He served in other public posts and as Covington city solicitor for more than a decade. And his service as an attorney, a public sector attorney, uniquely placed him at the center of key events in our region over the years. He's committed to the local bar. He chairs the NKBA Local Government Committee, serves on the NKBA board. He helps lead the Boys and Girls Club as its president locally. And he became the Northern Kentucky City County Management Association's 2018 Administrator of the Year. So on behalf of the NKBA, Frank, welcome to the Legends program.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And all that, I guess, means I'm getting old more than anything else.
Frank and I have a little bit of a history together. We were both born and raised in Owensboro, Kentucky. And so I was gonna start out with a smart aleck question by asking Frank what it felt like to be a legend. but I'm gonna move past that. And we're gonna start just where we typically start with these programs, which is trying to gain some insight and information about how things started for Frank in his life. And so Frank, if you could share with us some of your big early influences growing up, that either shaped you or contributed ultimately to you becoming a lawyer, that'd be a great way to kick us off.
Well, I appreciate it. I find this endeavor to be somewhat strange and different and weird. I very much appreciate it, but it's odd to me because I am one who does not seek out things like this, but it's very much appreciated. So I grew up in Owensboro, where legend Rob Hudson grew up, and we share a lot of similar. We share a lot in our backgrounds, and we know Owensboro pretty well because we grew up there. I went to Owensboro High School, which is where Rob went, and then off I went to Murray State University and spent 4 years there and got a political science and journalism degree. And then when I left Murray, I went to Louisville. I worked for the Louisville Times as a copy clerk. I was the lowest man on the totem pole at the Louisville Times, which was an afternoon newspaper in Louisville, which was a great experience. And then I went to work for the Landmark Community Newspapers, which owns newspapers throughout Kentucky and Indiana. It was recently sold and purchased by Paxton. But anyway, they owned newspapers throughout Kentucky, and they sent me to Lebanon, Kentucky, where I was the newspaper representative for the Lebanon Enterprise. So I was like 22 years old when I went there, or 23 years old when I went there, and young and dumb, and now I'm old and dumb. But so I learned a lot about writing and taking pictures and newspaper work there in Lebanon. And they shipped me to Cynthiana, Kentucky, where I was the newspaper editor for 5 years there. And I worked in Cynthiana as the editor for 5 years, and had learned a lot and had a good time there. But my father passed away when I was 29 years old. He left me a little bit of money, not a lot of money. And so I said, at that point in time, I said, I want to do what I've always wanted to do, and now's the time. So I applied to go to Chase Law School, and I got in, and I literally left my desk at the Cynthiana Democrat and started driving to law school. I was driving about 72 miles a day one way and going to classes at Chase. And at that point in time, I'm 29 years old and I'm married. And my wife, Judy, had just graduated from the University of Kentucky College of Pharmacy. So she was a young pharmacist getting started. And off we come up here to Northern Kentucky to, advance our careers up here. I remember I was driving 72 miles a day, one way, in a beat up old Chrysler station wagon that was rusted out at the bottom. And I would pull in to the law school gate, and I would look over, and there would be people like Daryl Cox, who was one of my classmates. He was driving a brand new Mercedes, and here I was in this beat up old station wagon. Anyway, that's kind of how I got to where I am right now.
Well, it sounds like maybe you always wanted to be an attorney, but you were waiting for the right time, in the right place in your life with the ability to fund it. Was that the case, or was this something you came to later on in life after you became a journalist?
No, I wanted to be an attorney ever since I was a little boy. So the books I read, the articles I read, that's what I always wanted to be. And to be frank about it, I didn't know that I didn't know that I could get in law school. I didn't have the confidence at the time, and it just took me a while to, get traction. So I did okay. I did well in law school, and I always tell people I was in the upper half of the bottom third, which I'm very proud of. Which is not true. I was in the upper half of my class, but I had a really good time in law school. I learned a lot, changed my life, and here I sit today. So,
well, and this transition from journalism to law school and practicing law, it sounds like a very natural connection, because a lot of us didn't learn how to write until much later on in life, but it sounds like you hit the ground running pretty fast at a young age when it comes to writing. I guess that was a big plus for you.
Yeah, writing. Well, I studied writing. When I worked for Landmark, they would send us to seminars and weekend-long seminars, and we would study and learn about how to write. I remember Jack Carey was a copy editor at the Louisville Times at the time, and I was a young punk just coming out of college, and he's the kind of guy that smoked cigarettes and drink whiskey during the day at his desk. And he stopped me one time and he said, "Who are you, boy?" I said, "Well, I'm Frank Warnock. I just got out of journalism school. I'm here just to learn." He says, "All you need to know is write it bright, write it right, and write it tight. That's all the journalism you need. So you go by those rules, you'll be okay." So that's a pretty good synopsis of how to write.
Frank, did you do any report? Were you a reporter then too? It wasn't, you weren't just writing, you were out, I suppose you were out gathering information about stories too, right?
Yeah. So as a copy clerk at the Louisville Times, it was my job to go get the newspaper as it came off of the press, and then distribute the paper to the copy editors. And also pulled, at the time they had the Associated Press wire and the UPI wire and those type of things. And so I would grab the paper off of those wires and cart them over to the various copy editors at the Louisville Times, and then they would input that information into the newspaper. But they also sent me out as a neighborhood reporter, where I would go out to neighborhoods, and I also was a rock review writer for the Louisville Times. So I did a few concerts during my tenure there. So.
Well, that's definitely the coolest thing you shared with us so far. But and I would expect, being a reporter too, it's almost a little bit akin to investigating a case, as an attorney to try to defend it or bring it, or to interviewing a witness as it pertains to a case. So those skills, it seems like, can nice transition from that career to law. And hey, I understand, I know you were in private practice. We talked about your public sector practice just a little bit in the intro, but you had a lot of years in private practice before you moved on over to focus on public sector law. So how long were you in private practice, and what was your practice area?
So I was in downtown Cincinnati. I was in the Mercantile building for a while, and then I moved over to the Kroger building, and I was in with my partner was Albert T. Brown, and we did a lot of civil litigation. We did insurance defense, and we did insurance subrogation, and that's sort of where I cut my teeth as far as litigation and learning about the rules of civil procedure. And we did a pretty fair volume of subrogation work, and we did insurance defense work on top of that. And that's where I cut my teeth on civil litigation. Towards the end of my tenure there with Albert, I was doing about a trial a month, maybe 2 trials a month. Most of them were bench trials, but got to where, how do you prepare your trial notebook and writing your opening statement, and what are the rules about hearsay, and being able to put your trial notebook together for each trial as they came about. So I learned a lot doing that.
Well, did you consciously choose litigation as your practice area, or was it one of those situations where, for me, where I ended up was not necessarily initially a conscious or deliberate choice, but it worked out okay. What did you choose litigation, or was that just the very best job available at the time?
I just kind of fell into it. I knew I wanted to do civil litigation. I did not want to do criminal. That was not something I wanted to do. So I leaned towards that inclination at that point in time. There were not a lot of jobs around back then, so you had to kind of scramble. And then Thomas Vergamini was in with Albert Brown at the time, and he left to go to work for, I believe, Lens Crafters at the time. So I took Thomas Vergamini's place. A lot of people know Tom, and he's a very good attorney. And so I sort of stepped in there and took over his role, working with Albert, and we concentrated solely on civil litigation. That's all we did.
Well, as you look back on it, what do you think were some of the keys for you becoming proficient in civil litigation and private practice?
For me, it was actually trial by fire. You had to. Albert would hand me a file and say, "You got to be in court tomorrow with this," without me having any knowledge about what was in that file. And so I'd be a day later, I'd be in front of a judge arguing a motion after being given the file about 24 hours earlier. So you learn by doing it. I traveled the circuit. I was in Boone County, I was in Campbell County, I was in Kenton County. I was also, I took the Kentucky Bar Association exam first, and then 6 months later, I took the Ohio Bar. And so I found myself traveling in Butler County and Warren County and Claremont County and Hamilton County. The Hamilton County courts were right down the street from me. So I spent a lot of times just going from courthouse to courthouse to courthouse in that circuit.
One of the things that we're trying to do with these programs is help newer lawyers, the future generations of lawyers, to kind of understand the commitment that it takes to becoming proficient and as a lawyer. Now, I don't want us to sound like the older people who say, "Oh, back in the day, it was really tough." And I get that maybe younger generations don't appreciate that sort of sharing, but the reality is, I'm sure you went through some very arduous times in terms of your commitment to law in order to learn it and become proficient at it. Can you describe what it was like to actually go in and try a case or two each month back in those days?
Yeah, things are a lot different now. The computers were not as prevalent as they are now. So it was a lot more paper. Things were a lot different back then. when you went to the law library, there were actually books that you had to read, and you had to actually physically shepherdize a case, and you had to do that with paper, not a computer. So things changed and morphed over time. But you know, running a law office, you're also running a business, and you have to hire secretaries, and you have to pay your insurance, health insurance, and your legal insurance. You have to pay for things like office supplies and computers. And when you're a two-man show and you're renting an office space in downtown Cincinnati, you know, some days you'd look in the bank account and there'd be $300 there, and you want to know where you're going to pay, how you're going to pay the rent. And 2 weeks later, you might have $300,000 laying there to work with. So, you know, it's kind of up and down. But as long as you stayed focused and you did the best you could, we always did okay. So, but as far as actually practicing cases, you know, it's somewhat, you have to be focused. You have to be a people person. You have to be able to go to places that you would not normally go, to talk to witnesses and gather evidence and take pictures and do those small things that you have to do if you're going to be successful as a trial attorney, in addition to all the legal research and writing and so
and
forth.
becoming immersed in the matter. You know, it can and does at times consume us. And well, I always like to ask each of the, you know, the legends we interview about mentors, and you know, both within private and public sectors, where there, in your work, were there mentors who played a big role in your development, and you know, in a nutshell, what did they do to help you out?
Well, I would have to say Albert Brown, who I went to work for right out of law school. He taught me how to understand the necessity of being able to comprehend and implement the rules of civil procedure. So we did a lot of work related to understanding the rules and being prepared for trial with the use of the rules of civil procedure. We had volumes of materials in our law library concerning civil procedure and how to use the rules to our favor and represent our clients. We even had a book called Dombrov on dirty tricks that we would study. There were a few downtown lawyers who you had to keep an eye on because you knew when you took them on, it was going to be a battle. So we did everything that we could to place ourselves in a position of understanding the rules and abiding by the rules. So,
and the great thing is, once you know the basics and your knowledge becomes a little deeper, a lot of that knowledge, I think, with respect to the rules, it doesn't leave you. I mean, we've got to update it, but that's a terrific foundation, you know, to help take you to the, you know, the next level of your practice, your public sector work. And when did you have your first foray into the public sector, and how did that come about? Because that's a big change to move from private into public, I think.
right. So when I was a newspaper editor, I went to recreation board meetings. I went to school board meetings. I went to fiscal court meetings. I went to city council meetings and a lot of other meetings. And I sort of got the bug. I interviewed a lot of politicians, a lot of people running to be the governor, people running for Senate. I did a lot of interviews over those years. I was essentially a newspaper editor and writer for about 7 years. And as each election cycle would go by, of course, all of the politicians that were running for office on a statewide level, they would come to town and they would want publicity. So they would come to the newspaper office and or the radio station, and they would and or the Kiwanis Club or the Lions Club or whatever group that would be meeting at that point in time. And there I would be with my pencil and my notebook and asking questions and writing things down and trying to understand their point of view and report that to the public through the newspaper. So that is where I sort of caught the bug to engage in government service. When I got out of law school, I went into the civil litigation route. And as time went by, as you can imagine, representing insurance companies is not the most fun thing to do. So I started thinking about other things. And this sounds very strange, but I was mowing my yard in Bellevue. I was mowing my front yard, and here came Mayor Tommy Wheathorn down the street with his dog. And he says to me, Joe Meyer is our city attorney, and Joe is engaged in an election right now that's pretty intense. He was running for Senate at the time. And he says, Mayor Wheathorn says, will you start coming to our meetings and fill in for Joe? And I told Tom at the time, I said, Tom, I am not a city attorney. I do not know municipal law. I know civil procedure, and I know how that works. And I do have an interest in government, but I don't want to misrepresent what I can do for you. He says, just show up and don't say anything, and I'll tell you what to say, and don't worry about it. So that was in 1995 at that time. And I started working in Bellevue, filling in for Joe Meyer. And for whatever reason, Joe never came back. And 10 years later, I was still sitting in for Joe Meyer for the Bellevue City Council, serving as city attorney.
Well, and Frank, as far as making that connection to the mayor, were you, and you talked about your prior engagement as a journalist, where you were accustomed to going to evening meetings and talking with people. And did you more or less kind of continue with that once you became a resident of Bellevue, or how or maybe the mayor was just generally aware of you as an attorney? I'm looking in a sense for a connection there to how does a young person or a newer lawyer, begin to make those kinds of connections that can result in, you look at this development for you, moving in the direction of being a public sector lawyer, literally changed your life. And so how do you really get there other than happenstance? Were you becoming known in the community, or were you going to any meetings or participating in different functions?
I was becoming active in the community as far as going to engagement events, community events throughout the community, and getting to know some people. I was, out and about quite a bit in Bellevue. I jogged through Bellevue. I had friends here at Bellevue. When I my first semester in law school, I was driving that 72 miles a day, and I said, I can't keep doing this. This is too much. And so I actually moved above Boots. Old timers around here will know what I'm talking about, but Boots Body Shop is not there anymore, but it was on the main Fairfield Avenue in Bellevue. So I moved in with one of my law school class buddies there, and actually lived above Boots Body Shop while I went to law school. And my Mike Bayberry was his name, and we would go out at night and we would get to know some of the locals, and then my wife found a house in Bellevue on Harrison Avenue, and it's a one-bedroom, small little house, a little yellow brick house, and we bought that house, I think, for $38,000 back in the day. And I think the interest rate at that point in time was about 13%, and we bought it on a one-year ARM, and the interest rate went down every year after 13%.
Right.
So anyway. We would go out and about and go to different neighborhood meetings and things like that.
Yeah, living your life and being a part of the community can make a big difference. And so you've got this first opportunity with Bellevue, and you said you were new to it. How in the heck do you become proficient, in the public sector as a counsel solicitor or attorney or a city attorney? How does that even work?
Well, you have to study the law. That's the main thing. So you start with the law. So the Kentucky League of Cities has a municipal law manual, and that I call that my Bible. It's about an inch thick or so, and I'm in and out of that book probably once or twice a week. So if you're a young attorney, you're starting out and you want to understand municipal law, that's a good place to start. And then a lot of it is just connecting yourself with other attorneys. You have to have a support base. If you have to write a motion for summary judgment on a particular issue, such as homelessness, or how to regulate First Amendment rights in the realm of public speech or advertising, or how do you deal with the homeless population in your city. It's always best to have a network of fellow attorneys who have been there, done that, and that you can rely on. I probably receive at least 1 or 2 phone calls a week, or an email or 2 a week, where somebody has a unique problem that they have to confront. So today I talked with someone about doing an interlocal agreement for two joint cities doing that together. And I think some folks know that I was city attorney at the time when we combined the Bellevue and Dayton fire departments, and we did that with an interlocal agreement and created a joint board. So I found myself in that conversation today.
Well, at some point you made a transition on, although I guess you were working with Bellevue and you had some opportunity with the city, but then you transitioned to full time. If you could share with our attendees, how does that happen? How do you sort of go from Bellevue over to the bigger role with the city of Covington?
So I had my private practice downtown, busy with that, and then I became city attorney of Bellevue on a contract basis. I did that for 10 years. And then in that time frame, I became city attorney of Melbourne, Kentucky, which I think has about, 600 people in it. And that was always interesting. I would drive out to Melbourne to go to their monthly meeting, and we would back the tractor out of the building. And then we'd set up all the tables and chairs, and then we would have our council meeting. And then we would put up the tables and chairs and put the tractor back where it belonged. So it was a unique experience out there in Melbourne. But anyway, 2005, Jay Fawcett was the then city attorney of Covington and had been serving in that role for several years. And he knew that I was city attorney of Bellevue and Melbourne, and I was becoming active in the local government committee through the Northern Kentucky Bar Association, which when I was doing the Bellevue and Melbourne thing. I was also a attorney for the fire department also for several years. And I made a lot of connections there. And so Jay realized that I might be a good fit there in Covington. Prior to that, Covington hired me in 2003 to write its fairness ordinance. It was kind of a hot potato at the time, and there was an inclination by the elected leaders that they wanted to do this. I think there was a majority on the Covington Commission who wanted to do it, but it was sort of a controversial thing at the time. As you look back now, it's becoming more accepted. As you look around the state, Lexington has a fairness ordinance. Louisville has one, Dayton has one, Bellevue has one. I think there's roughly 17, 18, 19, 20 cities within the state that have a fairness ordinance now. So it's becoming more accepted. But in 2003, I think you were involved in that process too, if my memory serves me. You were one of the Chamber of Commerce representatives.
I was, and I wanted to mention that you and others just did a masterful job in convening the various stakeholders in the community and taking a very, very positive approach to that. And I think most of the attendees will understand what a fairness ordinance is, but in a nutshell, it's extending protection under our discrimination laws to all people, regardless of their sexual persuasion and sexual orientation. And I think that was sort of the heart of the issue. And so you could go about that, and if you involve stakeholders, just like you did, Frank, I think the outcome was tremendous, and I do want to say thank you for that. And if that was a big opportunity for us to work together, and if that's how you've handled all these interlocal agreements and other matters, I know why Covington got things done. So thank you. But it was a nice success, wasn't it, Frank?
Yeah, so went into it. A lot of people in the business community were not very receptive to it at the time because they perceived it to be an onus or a burden to them and a possible detriment to their ability to conduct business within the community. They felt like they might be punished for something that they did not want to deal with. And this ordinance, a fairness ordinance, provides protection in the area of housing, employment, and public accommodation to gay people and others, which I think we all want to enjoy. So I was kind of proud. I met with all of the Covington Business Council, the Chamber of Commerce, other key stakeholders, religious folks within the community. We tried to talk it out, tried to understand it. We put provisions within the fairness ordinance at the time that gave it some stopgap measures where things could not get out of hand and try to protect, have a balanced approach to it. So I think, and it passed unanimously by the council or by the commission at the time. So I was glad to get that done. I've also written fairness ordinance for Bellevue. When I got here 2.5 years ago, that's one of the first things that we did. And it passed unanimously also. There was a little resistance to it here also. I made the effort in Park Hills as a volunteer. That didn't go so well. So, but I did go in there and make the effort and volunteered my time to try to, I think at some point in time they'll do it. It just wasn't the right time to do it. So.
Well, I may have mentioned before that the time frame when you came to this region was a time of really big change, and most of those changes were for the good. And if we look at where we were then in 1987 and where we are now, it's such a better place for people to work, play, and live. And I'm interested in hearing about your perspective on, once you became the city solicitor and you were or full-time with the city, or beyond just the fairness ordinance, what were the big changes that you saw in the city of Covington, our largest city in northern Kentucky, and what was your role with respect to some of those changes?
Yeah, I think in 2005, when I first came on board with Covington, one of the reasons that I got the job was because of the manner in which the fairness ordinance was handled. Now, when I got there, it was July 5th of 2005, and I remember walking in the building. About an hour later, they had an executive session, and they told me that the landing on the Ohio River that was owned by Covington was sinking into the river. The water was flowing in the boat, the water was flowing out of the boat. And at that point in time, there were restaurants that were doing business on the boat. And they told me in an executive session on my first day, you've got to evict the restaurant people because the boat is not stable. I said, well, can you guys tell me where my desk is maybe located? Where's my office? So my first day on the job, I was marching down the street to tell the restaurant establishment owner that he could not do business there anymore. And he had to get off the boat because of the danger that was happening. And that did not go well because they thought that the landlord, the city of Covington, had a duty to maintain the premises in a safe manner and had not done so. So we had to do a little legal tussle before we could remove the tenant from the boats.
I assume they wanted you to fix the boat, right? Or
we had a lease and they wanted the boat repaired, and the commission at the time wanted the boat shut down because there was a very large pump on the boat that was costing the city a lot of money to run. And so that was somewhat of a challenge at the time.
Well, I know you've had some First Amendment battles through the years, and And what are some of the other, well, the First Amendment and some of the other big, which I use the word big, I mean, significant legal controversies that ended up affecting the community there?
Yeah, so going back to the boat, you'll find this amusing. I remember we finally got the legal entanglement removed from the boat. And so we tried to sell the boat, and nobody wanted to buy a leaky boat. It's a barge at the time. So we did some marketing for it, and we finally got somebody to buy it for scrap. So it had these big pumps on this boat that was floating in the Ohio River, and they actually took the boat from Covington, Kentucky, and floated it down the Ohio River with these big pumps as the water would run in the bottom of the boat, the pumps would pump it out. So where did they take the boat? They took the boat to Owensboro, Kentucky for scrap, and they parked the boat there. And the purchaser of the boat said, I don't need these pumps. They're not necessary. I'm not going to pay for these pumps. So they said, okay. And they took the pumps off the boat, and the barge promptly sank to the bottom of the Ohio River there in Owensboro, Kentucky, the next day. So that's where that landing ended up. But no, we handled so 15 years of being 14 to 15 years of being city solicitor of Covington. Why don't you try that sometime if you want to see your blood pressure go up?
That's a good run. That's an excellent run in that position. That's special. So
yeah, it was. I had a blast doing it. I did not realize how challenging it was until I walked away from it. And as I look back, I think I can be proud of a lot of the accomplishments that we did there. So in 2005, you didn't have the Ascent. Now everybody recognizes the Ascent building. And I was there on the day that Bill Butler crawled up on a bulldozer, and as a marketing tool, he moved the earth where the Ascent is now built, driving a bulldozer. So we did industrial revenue bonds for that project, and that was a residential project, and it was kind of unique to use residential industrial revenue bonds at that point in time. There was a springing executory interest that was used to accommodate the payments in lieu of taxes structure that was put into place. So if you bought a unit there, you didn't get a fee simple title, you got a springing executory interest. So that was interesting to marshal all of those titles through there. Marty Butler was a big part of putting all of that together, but I was the city solicitor at the time, had to review those documents and marshal the financing through the city of Covington. So piece by piece, if you go throughout Covington while I was there, there's a lot of structures and buildings that were not there that are there today because of some of the work that I was a part of when I worked for the city of Covington. Things like Braxton Brewing was not there. That was actually where the artist center was for the city of Covington, and that got shut down to accommodate the development of Braxton Brewing. The Mutual building at the corner of Madison and Pike Street was a beat up old jewelry store that was no longer being used. It was actually being used as an insurance office, and now that's condominiums and a bourbon bar that's located there. So as you look around Covington, a lot of these things were not there when I first got in Covington, and the city of Covington was a big part of putting those things together. The Fifth and Main apartments were not there. Before that was there. There was a bank, and in that bank there was going to be a drug treatment center at the time. And I went through at least 2 methadone clinic cases where the city did not want to host the development of a methadone clinic within the city. And I remember at the point in time, when that was a hot subject, a hot topic, our legal department did the research related to allowing or not allowing methadone clinics. And we actually went to the city commission at the time. We said, "You're going to lose this case. We're going to lose this case." And we were told to keep fighting, keep marshaling, get your shield and spear out and see if you can stop it. And of course, we lost both of those cases. We had to write large checks, but those are some of the challenges that we had.
Well, what do you think as far as the turnaround down there and its connection with legal and city management? What do you think were the keys? Because I mean, I know a lot of the attendees won't be able to remember what it was like in the mid '80s as compared today. Was it a public-private partnership with businesses and legal and city officials? How did it happen in a nutshell?
Well, I can relay a lot of it to the leadership that was in Covington at the time. Jay Fawcett transitioned from city solicitor to the city manager, and he was actually on the cusp of a lot of this development, and he actually helped to effectuate a lot of it. So Jay was instrumental in emphasizing the need for economic development and actually hiring an economic development staff and implementing economic development tools that were the groundwork and the foundation for a lot of these developments that occurred. So I give him a lot of credit for that, to having the vision to establish goals and model your financing around those goals, and focusing on particular ways to bring your city up. We implemented a lot of tools. We would, by way of example, on the west side of Covington, there was some dilapidated housing, and we assembled a team of attorneys and real estate professionals to go in and buy properties in that location now that is presently going to be developed into high-end housing just off of 12th Street, Martin Luther King Avenue in Covington. So, you lay the foundation, you lay the groundwork, you plan, you have vision, and then you implement. So that's what we did at the time.
Well, and one of the things we're probably not going to have time to cover, and I just wanted to add briefly that, Frank didn't just lead the legal function for the city. He hired and trained Covington's legal staff, to a great extent, and he has proteges in our community now. And we talked about Frank's mentors and people who influenced him. Now he's been able to pay that forward, so to speak, with some of the members of the next generation of lawyers in Northern Kentucky. So thank you for that, Frank. And we have a couple more subjects to cover, and let's first focus on community service and service to the profession. I think every single legend that we've interviewed has very strong beliefs, feelings, and commitment to both community service and service to the profession. So this is an opportunity for you to share your views on those subjects and help us to understand how you became involved beyond beyond the work that you do, which is very much, I think, a form of community service. But how have you chosen to spend your time with respect to the community? How do you view our role as a lawyer, or our roles as lawyers, in helping our communities along to thrive?
Yeah, I to transition back just a little bit, when I first got to Covington, I was the legal department. I was the Board of Adjustment attorney. I was the Planning and Zoning Board attorney. I was the Human Rights Commission attorney. oh, by the way, you're the city commission attorney, where you have to write ordinances and write orders and resolutions and do legal research. And the city of Covington was a self-insured entity at the time. And so I had to defend cases against the city, and I had to sue people and entities on behalf of the city. So as I looked around there, I saw nobody can do this. This is not real. This is not reality. Of course, I had contract attorneys that I worked with to accomplish a lot of that, but I realized I got to build a department. So over the years, we built a good, strong legal department with Michael Bartlett and Cassandra Zoda and Star Ford and others. And when I left the city of Covington, we had 5 attorneys there doing legal work. So I had a full head of hair when I started in Covington, and about a year later, I was totally bald. So I don't know what happened. But anyway, Alex Mattingly was one of the attorneys that I worked with for about 6 or 7 years, and we were down in the trenches doing all of the heavy lifting for all of the development agreements and the claims against the city and the personnel issues. We had 3 unions. We had the fire union, we had the police union. You've done union work, you know how that works. We had ASHME, that's the public services union. So I had to be familiar with union law and personnel law. We had civil service employees, we had non-civil service employees, and we have different paths of travel about how to discipline folks. The Policeman Bill of Rights, you had to know that. So all of those different aspects. The point I'm trying to make is that Alex was in there in the trenches with me. We trusted each other, we supported each other, and as he and I, he's a young attorney, and I knew he was going to move on at some point. And now he's the city manager of Crescent Springs, so or Crestview Hills. I'm sorry, Crestview Hills. And then I'll say another gentleman I worked with who is now Matt Dowling, and he's the city manager of Ellesmere. So I think mentoring, having trust, engaging with each other, and being active in your community is very, very important. Supporting the people that you work with and being there for them and asking them to be there for you is very, very important. I have been president of the Boys and Girls Club in Newport for over 10 years. I'm proud of that. I've done a lot of work for them. Mainly, we are fundraisers, is what we're supposed to do. So we have good years, we have bad years. COVID has really hit us below the belt as far as being able to raise money. But young attorneys need to know that they got to put in the time. They got to show up. They've got to engage and volunteer their time. And a lot of that volunteerism will turn into actual legal representation. For me, it's kind of something that I feel it was ingrained in me by my mother and my father, who were active in their church and active within the community in Owensboro. And my father was president of the Cliff Hagan Boys and Girls Club in Owensboro when I was growing up, and I was very proud of that. And so I kind of wanted to follow his footsteps in that regard. So yeah, it's all about engagement, being there, getting involved in your community, and my work with the local government committee. I've been doing that. I've been chairing that for over 10 years. I think nobody else wants to do it, and actually enjoy doing it. So I think we've built up a pretty good meeting that we have each month, and we get together and talk about the law every month. We talk about legal issues, and we debate the law, and we have a lot of fun doing it. And then when all that's said and done, we gossip about each other at the meetings. So
I like the fact that you have the community focus and the bar focus. So you've got direct service to the profession and the connection to the community. I think that rounds things out nicely. And thank you for all you do for the NKBA also, because your service on the board and your leadership and your efforts with the local government committee have been terrific. But we do have a couple of other topics. One about professional responsibility, and I'm not asking you to quote the rules, rote and verse, or anything of that nature, but instead, just wanted to hear your perspective on, generally what you think the keys are to, maintaining compliance. What sorts of attorney behaviors and approaches are going to, more often than not, maybe help us through some difficult times and professional responsibility situations.
Sure. When I'm out with my friends, my lawyer friends, Jay Fawcett, Jeff Sanders, others, we always have these deep discussions about the meaning of life. What is the secret of life? And we always have this great debate. Each one of us has a different opinion about what that is. But what my stepfather taught me was, he said two things: if you'll be honest and if you'll work hard, if you just do those two things, that is the secret of life. And so that's what I've tried to focus on. Sometimes I stumble, and sometimes I do things I wish I hadn't done. But I try to focus on those two things. Just be honest with yourself, be honest with others, and work hard. Make the effort. So for me, that is Frank's nutshell version of how to deal with life. This crazy life that we are engaged in.
It cures a lot of ills and avoids a lot of problems, and that leads us to the general topic of civility. And your views on that, and whether you think are we going backwards, and is it important that we remain and grow in our civility as attorneys?
Yeah, if you probably read leadership books by John Wooden, who was the UCLA basketball coach, and he wrote about the foundation of a successful organization. He had 10 years of NCAA championships. I don't think anybody's ever matched that. One of his sayings was that a good conscience is a soft pillow. So if you have a good conscience, you're going to sleep well that night. So I think those are good words to live by. Try to treat others with dignity and respect. Expect them to trust you, and you have to trust them. The leaders that have a harder edge to them, that don't take that approach, I don't think it works. I know in Bellevue here, we have weekly staff meetings, and we have one-on-one meetings with our leaders of each department. And I know this: I don't run the city; they run the city. They are the bosses. I'm not the boss. And that's kind of the approach I took in Covington too. When I was working there, I had to rely on their trust, my coworkers' trust and support, and they had to rely on mine also. So I think it was a mutually beneficial relationship.
Well, and as we move towards the close of the program, a couple of quick questions.
Okay.
For our attendees, something maybe that's not widely known about you that people might find interesting. Some quirky something that you think people might like to hear. What do you think?
Well, there's a lot of things I could say, but I won't. I ran in 5Ks and 10Ks and half marathons for probably 30 years. Some people may not know that. So that's not, I'm still, every weekend I go to a different location within the greater Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati area, and I do a jog. So that's sort of my way to get out and see things and enjoy the city. And also, when I was in high school, I was the high school drummer. I was the snare drummer for the Owensboro High School marching band. And some people may not know that. And I grew up, my mother told me, you pick an instrument. I don't care what it is, you're going to play an instrument. So of course I picked drums as my instrument. And at one point I was in a rock band called Stray Cat. So I was the drummer for the Stray Cat there in Owensboro, Kentucky. So
that yeah, it makes me want to go down to Covington and have a beer together to talk about the old days back in Owensboro and otherwise. So, hey, thank you, Frank. And final words of wisdom, wit, or advice for the next generation of lawyers in Northern Kentucky?
Well, I will reiterate what my secret of life is to work hard and be honest. You do those two things, you're going to be okay. That's, I know it's basic and simple, but that's basically what I have to say about that.
So, thank
And
you.
I've really enjoyed it. I find this very strange and odd, but I'm kind of proud of it.
The whole idea of being a legend, right? But you know, I want to make sure, bear with me here for a second, because I want to make sure that I've got all, if there are questions, I want to make sure we're getting them. Just a second. I don't see anything there on the questions. And Julie, I think you're, you know, at least I can see you on my screen here. If you see questions that I'm missing, you let us know, okay? Are we okay? All right.
There are no questions.
No questions. Then, hey,
Everybody's
Frank, thanks. You know, just on behalf of the Bar Association, we want to thank you for your service to the profession and to the region. You know, we've interviewed an outstanding public sector lawyer here, but looking back on the last few months of these programs, just as a reminder, our focus on different practice areas and different paths to success. It's really important for us to hear these various points of view. We've talked with a corporate attorney, a labor attorney, a litigator, a family law attorney, a chief judge, and now a public sector attorney. And we've really tried to focus on the positive impact an attorney can have on our profession and the community. Next, we're going to interview State Representative Ed Massey. He's another true leader within our profession. So now we're going to talk to a legislator as well. So please join us at noon on September 12th for that program. A reminder to our attendees, Julie Jones, our executive director, is going to be sending out CLE information to the attendees. And we always want your input at the NKBA. Please do contact us with program recommendations. If you want somebody in the community to, you know, to be considered for one of these interviews, please let us know. We're going to have a slate to fill in 2022 as well. Contact us with any suggestion you may have. Frank and Julie, is there anything else for the good of the order before we adjourn here today?
I'm all good. I appreciate it. You did a great job.
Thank you very much, Frank. Hey, and thanks to the attendees and for those who are viewing the video for joining us. Everybody have a terrific day.